Esperance stood at the gates of her new school, her heart pounding in rhythm with the chatter of students around her. The air buzzed with excitement, but she felt out of place. Her stepfather, François, had made it clear that this school was her last chance. If she failed here, she wouldn't just lose his grudging financial support. She'd lose the slim hope of creating a better life for herself. She adjusted her second-hand backpack, the frayed straps digging into her shoulders. Walking into the courtyard, she glanced around nervously, hoping to blend into the crowd. Her resolve wavered as she spotted groups of students laughing together, already in their cliques. The bell rang, and she shuffled toward her first class, clutching her schedule like a lifeline. The first challenge of the day was math, a subject that always seemed to taunt her with its complexity. Her new teacher wasted no time diving into advanced algebra, scribbling equations on the board at lightning speed. Esperance's eyes darted between the symbols and her notebook, her pen hovering uselessly above the page. It felt like trying to catch water in her hands. Nothing stuck. When the bell signaled the end of class, Esperance stayed behind, pretending to organize her bag as she waited for the room to empty. She didn't want anyone to see the panic in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "You can do this. Just focus." But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. As she stepped into the hallway, the weight of her stepfather's expectations pressed down on her again. She had to find a way to succeed. Little did she know, her search for answers would lead her into a tangled web of secrets and betrayals. The first week at her new school dragged on painfully. Every night, Esperance pored over her textbooks, trying to decipher the material she didn't understand. Her head ached from staring at equations, but no matter how hard she tried, the numbers remained stubborn strangers. By Friday, the frustration reached its peak. Deciding she needed a quieter space to study, she wandered into the school library after classes. The room smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish, and the faint hum of the ceiling fans added a calming rhythm to the silence. She chose a table in the far corner and opened her math book. Her peace didn't last long. "Struggling, huh?" a voice interrupted. Startled, she looked up to see Quizera, a boy from her math class, standing across the table. His warm smile immediately disarmed her. He was tall, with an easy confidence that seemed to draw people in. Everyone in class knew him as the math prodigy, a reputation he wore like a badge. Esperance's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Is it that obvious?" Quizera laughed softly and pulled out a chair. "A little. Want some help?" She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to reveal how much she was struggling. But the frustration bubbling inside her won. "I guess I could use it," she admitted. For the next hour, Quizera patiently explained the equation she couldn't grasp. He broke down each problem step by step, his explanations clear and encouraging. For the first time all week, something clicked. "See? You're not bad at this," Quizera said, his grin widening as she successfully solved a problem. Esperance smiled back shyly. "Thanks. I might survive this class after all." She didn't know it then, but this meeting would mark the beginning of a complicated and life-changing connection between them. Over the weekend, Esperance replayed her conversation with Quizera in her mind. She had never met anyone so patient, and for the first time, she felt hopeful about improving in math. On Monday morning, as she settled into her seat, she was pleasantly surprised when Quizera approached her desk. "You know," he began, leaning casually against her table, "I've been thinking. If you're struggling with math, it might be easier if we work together regularly." "Like a study group?" she asked, though she knew she didn't have anyone else to bring into such a group. "More like tutoring," he clarified. "I could help you one-on-one. It'll be easier to keep up with the class that way." Esperance hesitated. The idea sounded perfect, but there was one problem. I don't think I can afford that," she admitted, lowering her gaze. Quizera waved her concern away. "Don't worry about payment. Just promise to do your best, and we'll call it even." Her heart lifted at his offer. and she agreed without much thought. The arrangement seemed almost too good to be true. Later that day, Quizera met Francois outside the school gates. The older man handed him a wad of cash, his expression stern. "Remember, keep her grades just low enough," Francois said. "I want her out of this school by the end of the term." Quizera nodded reluctantly, the money feeling heavier in his pocket than it should have. This wasn't the first time he had agreed to Francois's manipulative schemes, but this time, he couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. Esperance's first tutoring session with Quizera was a revelation. They met in the school's empty science classroom after hours, the fluorescent lights flickering above them. Quizera had a knack for breaking down even the most complicated problems into bite-sized pieces, and Esperance found herself more focused than ever. He was patient, never rushing her, always making sure she understood before moving on to the next equation. By the end of the lesson, Esperance had solved problems she would have once thought impossible. She couldn't stop smiling, a rare feeling of pride blossoming in her chest. "Thank you, Quizera," she said, packing her bag. "I never thought I'd get this far." Quizera smiled, pleased with her progress. "I told you, you're not bad at this. You just need the right help." As they walked out of the classroom together, the evening sun cast a warm glow over the school courtyard. Esperance felt something stir in her chest as she glanced at him. There was more to Quizera than just his intelligence. He was kind, and he seemed to genuinely care about her success. But as she caught his eye, she saw a flicker of something else in his expression, something fleeting and unreadable. She quickly looked away, dismissing it as nothing. Little did she know, Quizera's feelings for her were far more complicated than she could imagine. As they said their goodbyes at the gate, her heart fluttered, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this newfound connection was far from simple. Over the next few weeks, Esperance's tutoring sessions with Quizera became a regular routine. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after school, they met in the empty science classroom, where he helped her master her lessons. She found herself looking forward to these sessions, not just for the academic help, but because of the warmth and encouragement Quizera always offered. With each lesson, she began to notice little things about him. How his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he chewed on the edge of his pen when he was deep in thought, the quiet confidence he carried with him. Her admiration for him grew, and she couldn't deny the attraction she felt whenever they were together. One day, as they were finishing up a session on geometry, Esperance accidentally brushed her hand against his. The brief contact sent a strange thrill through her, and she quickly pulled her hand away, her face turning crimson. Quizera didn't seem to notice, but inside, he too was struggling with his own emotions. Every time he saw Esperance smile or laugh, it became harder to remember why he was doing this, why he had agreed to take her money to sabotage her grades. In the quiet moments, when they were alone in the classroom, he would catch himself staring at her, wondering what it would be like if things were different. But every time the thought crossed his mind, guilt would pull him back, reminding him that he was doing this for money that would allow him to escape his own family's troubles. But the more time he spent with Esperance, the harder it became to ignore the growing feelings he had for her. Weeks passed, and Esperance's confidence in her academic abilities grew. She was no longer terrified of math class. In fact, she looked forward to it. With Quizera's help, her grades steadily improved, and soon she was keeping up with the rest of the class. She felt proud of herself, but she also couldn't shake the growing bond between her and Quizera. One afternoon, as she was leaving the library, she noticed something strange. Quizera was talking to her stepfather, Francois. They were standing near the school gates, speaking in low, hurried tones. Esperance tried to make her presence known by walking past them, but she couldn't help overhearing snippets of their conversation. The grades, Francois was saying. She's improving. Make sure she stays below the passing mark. For now. Esperance froze. Her stomach twisted into knots as the words sank in. She knew something was wrong. Quizera's tutoring had helped her immensely, but now it all made sense. He had been paid by her stepfather to deliberately lower her grades, to keep her from succeeding. Her heart raced as she stumbled away from the conversation, her mind a whirlwind of betrayal. She had trusted Quizera, admired him, even started to develop feelings for him, and now it felt like everything had been a lie. When she confronted him later that evening, Quizera's face fell. "Esperance, Don't," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "How could you do this to me? Why didn't you tell me?" Quizera ran a hand through his hair, his guilt written all over his face. "I didn't want you to find out like this. Your stepfather, he paid me to keep your grades down. I was supposed to help you fail." Tears welled up in Esperance's eyes as the truth crashed over her like a wave. "I trusted you. I thought you cared about me." Quizera reached out, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need to think. I need to understand why you did this." He watched helplessly as she walked away, his heart heavy with regret. He had never imagined it would hurt this much to hurt her. Esperance barely slept that night. Her mind raced, replaying the conversation with Quizera over and over again. She couldn't shake the sting of betrayal. How could he have lied to her? All those hours of tutoring, all those moments of connection. It had all been a game. The next day at school, she avoided Quizera as best as she could. She couldn't look him in the eye. Every time he tried to approach her, she walked away, pretending she hadn't noticed. His attempts to speak to her after class were met with cold silence. She was furious, heartbroken, and confused. Quizera, on the other hand, was torn. The guilt gnawed at him with every passing hour. He had never expected Esperance to find out, and now he had to live with the consequences of his actions. He had started out helping her out of a sense of obligation, to earn money, to survive. But somewhere along the way, his feelings for her had become real. During lunch, he found himself sitting alone, staring at his uneaten food. His friends tried to make conversation, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking of Esperance, wondering if there was any way to fix what he had broken. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that fixing it might not be enough. The tension between Esperance and Quizera continued to build over the following days. It was impossible to ignore the elephant in the room, the way they used to share smiles, quiet moments of understanding, and now everything was clouded by his betrayal. She tried to focus on her studies, but her heart wasn't in it. On Friday afternoon, as she gathered her things in the hallway, Quizera caught up with her. "Esperance, please, can we talk?" She froze, but refused to look at him. "What's there to talk about, Quizera? You've made your choice." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. When I agreed to help your stepfather, I thought I could handle it. But when I started tutoring you, I realized I couldn't just keep pretending." Esperance's anger flared. "Pretending? You lied to me! You manipulated me!" Her voice rose as the frustration that had been building inside her poured out. "How am I supposed to trust you now?" Quizera's shoulders slumped. "I know I've made a mistake. I can't undo it. But I want to make it right." Esperance's eyes flashed with bitterness. "Make it right? You can't make this right. You've already done the damage." She turned away, her voice shaking as she added, "I don't want anything to do with you anymore, Quizera." As the days passed, Esperance's anger turned into a quiet sadness. She kept her distance from Quizera, but the pain of betrayal lingered. She wanted to believe that his feelings for her had been real, but how could she when his actions proved otherwise? Meanwhile, Quizera was struggling with his own demons. He had tried to make things right, but it felt as though every attempt was met with rejection. It was difficult to concentrate on anything at school, and his grades began to slip. His friends noticed the change, but he couldn't bring himself to explain why he was so distracted. Every time he saw Esperance, it felt like a punch to his gut. He couldn't forget the way she looked at him when she discovered the truth, hurt, betrayed, and broken. He had made a decision that could not be undone, and now he was paying the price. But as time went on, Quizera realized something else. He couldn't let her go. He had to find a way to make amends, even if it meant facing the consequences of his actions. One afternoon, as Esperance sat in the library trying to focus on her work, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Quizera standing behind her, his expression serious, but earnest. "I know you don't want to talk to me," he said, his voice soft. "But I have to ask you for one more chance. Just hear me out." Esperance looked at him, her heart racing. She was still angry, still hurt, but something in his voice made her hesitate. "You want to fix things?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. Quizera nodded. "I do. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want to show you that I'm not that person. I'll help you, truly help you. I won't take money from your stepfather anymore. I'll help you however I can, no strings attached." Esperance studied him for a long moment. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine regret in the way he spoke. But still, the wounds were too fresh. "How do I know I can trust you?" Quizera took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "You don't. But I'll prove it to you, if you'll let me." Esperance's mind raced. She didn't want to forgive him, but a part of her couldn't ignore the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could start over. "I'll think about it," she said finally, standing up to leave. For the next few days, Esperance kept her distance from Quizera, still torn between the hurt she felt and the glimmer of hope he had sparked. He had made his offer, no strings attached, no more manipulation. But could she believe him? Could she ever look at him the same way again? Quizera, on the other hand, wasn't giving up. He stayed after school, helping others in need and refusing any payment from his classmates. It was his way of showing Esperance that he was serious about changing. Yet, the more he tried to do the right thing, the harder it became. He missed her smile, her quiet intelligence, her presence in the classroom. One afternoon, as Esperance walked out of class, she noticed him sitting alone in the courtyard, staring at his phone with a defeated expression. Something inside her softened. She couldn't deny the guilt she felt for shutting him out without giving him a chance to explain himself properly. With a deep breath, she walked toward him. "Quizera," she said softly. He looked up, surprised to see her standing there. His face lit up with a mixture of hope and caution. "Esperance, you're talking to me?" "I'm not promising anything," she said, her voice steady but uncertain. "But I've been thinking about what you said." Quizera stood quickly, almost too eagerly. "You're willing to listen?" Esperance nodded slowly. "But you have to promise me no more lies, no more tricks. If we're going to do this, it has to be real." "Of course," he said immediately. "I swear I'll do whatever it takes to prove it." As they sat down together on the stone bench, the heavy silence between them seemed to lift just a little. Esperance still wasn't sure, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of something other than anger. Maybe there was a chance to rebuild what had been broken. Over the next few days, Esperance and Quizera began to talk more. Their conversations weren't just about school anymore. They shared stories about their families, their dreams, their fears. Quizera opened up about his difficult home life, how his father had been distant and his mother had always pushed him to excel. Esperance listened intently, surprised at how much she had in common with him. She too had grown up in a household where expectations were high, where failure wasn't an option. It was no wonder they had been drawn together in the first place. But the shadow of their past interactions still loomed over them. Whenever they talked about school, Quizera felt a pang of guilt. He had been paid to sabotage her, and the thought still haunted him. He couldn't erase the past, but he was determined to prove that he had changed. One afternoon after school, Quizera met Esperance in the courtyard again. This time, he had a different kind of offer. "I've been talking to some of my friends," he said, his voice low. "I'm going to speak to the headmaster about your grades. You should be placed in an advanced class, not one that holds you back. I'll make sure the system sees you for what you truly are. Someone capable." Esperance's heart skipped a beat. "You'd do that for me?" Quizera smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "I want to, and I'll keep helping you, no strings attached." It wasn't the grand gesture that erased all the hurt, but it was a start, a real honest effort on his part. For the first time in weeks, Esperance felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could rebuild something from the ashes of their broken trust.